G'day, welcome to another episode of Fighting Men of Rhodesia. My guest today is Craig Viljoen. He was the section officer in the BSAP and the security branch of the railways down at Rhodesia and other areas like that, which in itself should present some interesting stories. Craig, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you on board. How are you doing there in Johannesburg, I believe?
Yes, in Johannesburg, all's well, except for the potholes and the ongoing rain, but everything's fine.
Yeah, I love the Afrikaans word for potholes. It's slaggatte or something like that, isn't it?
Slaggatte, yes.
Yeah, that's a lovely name. My wife and I, when we drive around Salisbury in England, which has got more potholes than Johannesburg, let me tell you, yeah, we say, oh, look, another slaggatte, and nobody knows what we're saying, but
Yes.
a bit of humour to lighten it. So, give us a brief overview of where you were born and raised, and how you ended up in the police. What was your junior life story about?
I was born in March 1954. Grew up in Viljoen. Went to school in Viljoen. Lived a typical Rhodesian young boy's life of going fishing with either the family or loading up our bicycles and heading off to the nearest dam. So there was a lot of freedom, and a lot of outdoors. We spent all our freedom outdoors, and it was really a nurturing period. And then I wrote my O-level exams in November 1971, but I'd thought, what am I going to do after school? So I gave myself two choices: become a game ranger or join the police. I finished my schooling, got through to Form 5, obviously, got this required passes for O-level to join the police. And whilst mulling these two future jobs in my mind, I was walking past the Viljoen Central Police Station, and the huge wooden doors of the station opened, and this police car came out with the lights flashing and siren on. I said, that's what I want to be. Turned around and walked into the charge office and said, how do I join the BSAP? And that was the start of my career, which I started as a cadet 2 weeks later.
Good Lord.
Being under 18, I couldn't do any. I had to be 18 before I could go to Morris Depot for training. So they put me in a cadet uniform. My cadet number was C725. And they sent me to a little station called Southstown in Viljoen, middle to low class suburb. But as a cadet, I was not allowed to be exposed to any dead bodies or any fatal accidents or everything. I was wrapped up in cotton wool and got myself prepared. It was fortunate for me because from a discipline point of view, having come straight from school, I was used to discipline. And that came to the fore when I eventually got to Morris Depot in Salisbury to do my 6 months training as a police recruit. I just fell in with it, and I knew I'd made the right decision. I loved it. Loved going out with the patrol officers, and when they went out on a house break-in or something, and if there was a bad car accident, I was told to stay in the car or control traffic or something. I was not allowed to be exposed, as I said, to any bad injuries or death. I did that for 6 weeks, and then a very dear friend of mine and myself were loaded onto the train off to Salisbury to do our 6 months training. And it began at the end of February 72. And the day I turned 18, we were on parade, morning parade. And the instructor came to me and he said, "Here, Viljoen, you are now 18 years old. You have a choice. You can leave now, or you can take the path to the depot chief inspector's office where you will be signed on." Well, I didn't hesitate. I did the long march to my future, and in the depot, in the DCR's office, signed the necessary documents, went back, and that was the start of my training. It was intensive, a lot of foot drill, a lot of PT, and obviously a bit of written work, law and police, typing. We had to type our dockets. They weren't handwritten. All our dockets had to be typed. And we had a wonderful typing instructor. Her name was Miss Lovett. And I looked really forward, as did most of the guys, to our typing lessons. Because Miss Lovett was very attractive and she was a good teacher. So we enjoyed our typing, but there were underlying reasons as well.
Yeah, it helps when the instructor is easy on the eye and doesn't look like a battle axe.
Very much so. And she was very patient. And I remember in one typing lesson, we had two guys from South Africa, Terry Hart, sorry, and Mike Weston. And the guy, Mike Weston, he was having a problem typing. And the teacher, Miss Lovett, said, "Pierre Weston, you are typing as if you've got 9 fingers." And he lifted up his hands, and his little right pinky was missing. So it had been cut off in an accident. And she was most embarrassed about that. And thereafter, she sort of gave him a little bit of extra attention, knowing that she'd botched it and that he'd actually was typing with 9 fingers. But I got through depot. I enjoyed it. Like I said, the discipline was harsh. But what I saw between those of us, and there were a handful who had come straight from school into the police, handled the discipline a lot better than those men older than us, those recruits older than us, who'd been in an accountant or a store manager or whatever, and in their late 20s, whatever, they were now in a very disciplined environment, and some of them struggled. Some of them really struggled with discipline. And one of them was South African, another South African. His name was Alan Waldeck, and a big guy. He shouted his mouth off and saying that he was a gunner in the South African Navy. So initially we all thought, gee whiz, what are you doing up here? Anyway, he became a bit of a burden to the squad. He was one of those, he was a big guy, but he couldn't run for the love of life. He just could not run. And he held us back, and we had to do reruns. We had to go back around the assault course because he just held us back time after time. So one day at lunch, we got together and we plotted a plan to teach Patrol Officer Waldeck a lesson. And what we did that night after lights out, to prevent the male recruits from going upstairs to the female recruits' floor, they had a guard, a black constable guard with the stairways locked. Yeah. So we weren't that adventurous to go to the girls, but we told the guard, listen, we're just going downstairs. We're going to do some training. And he just said, okay, yeah, well, that's fine. So we took this Mr. Waldeck down. He was very scared and worried. And we put him in the horse water trough. There was water in it, obviously. And it was quite long. It was, quite a long. And we said to him, right, strip. And we were quite nasty to him. We said, get in and swim butterfly to the end. Well, he couldn't do it. And he just broke down. So we didn't expect him to get to break down so quickly and so so hard. But after that, he became so meek and mild. He was a changed person, but he still had problems with foot drill and everything else. And moving forward, I heard just after I left depot in September 1972 that he'd actually also passed out, but had returned to South Africa almost immediately. Mm. I think he found his time as a recruit in the British South Africa Police circa 1972 was a bit harsh. So depot was good. I fell in love with the horses. I thought, this is nice. I want to learn how to ride. But they selected the equitation squad would be the last squad of the previous year and the first squad of the new year. And unfortunately, I was in the second squad 2 of 72. And we didn't do equitation. We were the poor guys that had to clean the horses every Sunday morning. But we were taught how to clean. Oh, yes. We It wasn't just a case of taking a brush or a curry comb or a hoof pick or something and just, no, there was a procedure. Lift the dock, clean the tail, start with the left front foot, lift the foot, take out your pick and clean out the hoof and brush the horse. And those horses had a remarkable canny of smelling the alcohol from the Saturday night before, because we had Saturdays off. And we had a recruit, we weren't allowed to leave depot, but we had a recruit's canteen where on the Saturday night, knowing we'd be woken up at 5 the next morning, but being quite fit, we had some serious parties. But these horses they would smell the alcohol. And of course, we were a bit fragile. And oh my goodness, the horses would kick. They would, as you bending down to clean the left with the hoof, the left hoof, he'd bite your back or try and take your hat off, or worst of all, break away from the lines, because the instructor would bellow, "Catch that horse." Well, of course, that was an impossibility, but off we went. And I remember a horse by the name of Utah, a big brown horse, bay horse. He was big. He was known for giving recruits a bad time on a Sunday morning. I handled him once, and yes, he broke away, and yes, I had to chase him. But I was fortunate quite a few times to have a horse even bigger than Utah. I had this huge black horse called Bismarck. What a magnificent beast he was. And he was so gentle. He loved having his neck brushed. And I cottoned onto this quickly when I first started grooming him, that he would become very placid if I just took my time in rubbing his neck with the curry comb and the sponge and whatever. And with this great big head, he would fall asleep against my chest. And I couldn't. I'm 6'2". I couldn't touch his ears. He was massive horse. But what a beautiful horse! So we had some experience in cleaning the horses, believe me. And also on a Sunday morning, make sure the stables were clean. So that all formed part of a very rigid discipline scenario. And when we used to watch the equitation squads preparing for the opening of Parliament, their horses were magnificent. They would polish the horses' hooves like we would have to polish our boots for when we were on parade in depot. And they had their manes cropped, their tails short, their tails cut, and they looked so lacquer, so regal, and the riders just loved it. And when they did their rehearsals and things, I thought, I really still want to ride a horse, but that wasn't to be. And got through my 6 months. Never went home to Bulawayo. I was enjoying life in Salisbury with my newfound friends, and we were heading out towards the end of our training. And lots of footrule, as I said. And the big day came that we had our pass-out parade, where it was in full number 1 uniform, jodhpurs, leather leggings, and whatever, all very smart, marching to the police band and making a show. I was the right-hand marker, so I was quite visible in the front of the squad. And from there, we went to driving school, where we spent, I think it was about 4 weeks. And I never had a license. I went for a few lessons in Bulawayo before I joined the police, but they were nothing. So we did a lot of written work, a lot of exams before we even touched the vehicle. But what we did first is motorcycles. And those of us who had never ridden a motorcycle were told to ride the Matchless or the BSA 650 compression kick, this huge bike, compared to the Yamahas that the other recruits could ride because they had motorbike licenses. Oh my goodness, I spent most of my time on my backside falling off that 650 than I did in the saddle. And if you dropped your bike, the instructor would stop the ride, but you would have to pick your bike up. And believe me, the Matchless 650 is not a light bike. But the strange thing, Tony, was looking back and thinking, I actually enjoyed all that. It was I felt it was building my character.
Yeah.
And I just felt this air of confidence and looking forward to now that the training was over, we're doing our vehicles and motorcycle training. We the world was about to open for me, and I wanted to go back to the bush. I wanted to go to a police station in the middle of nowhere, preferably in my home province, which was Matabele land. So anyway, back to driving school. We spent the 4 weeks in driving school. As a matter of fact, I think it was 6 weeks. Did our motorcycle ride licenses, and that was great fun because we'd have to wear our white and leather epaulets in uniform, and we'd ride in a convoy of 2 motorcycles side by side with the instructor in the front, and we'd ride through Salisbury City, and all very smart and all great. And I think we made a reasonable impression on the public. And after bikes, it was learning to drive in a Land Rover. And that was a little scary for me because the Land Rover myself and 3 of my colleagues were given was renowned as, it was called the Green Mamba, mainly because it was painted green, but also it had funny little idiosyncrasies, like the clutch would slip. Or there'd be difficulty with the clutch in engaging gears because we were taught to double declutch, not just one pressure in, we were taught to double declutch, and that was a challenge anyway. And we got into this Green Mamba. The instructor knew that this vehicle was poison, and that it would come up and bite us, and it surely did. Often we would have a little problem with the clutch, and the steering would waver. It wasn't through neglect or anything. I think the Land Rover was just so old, but we learned how. It was a way of teaching us to respect the vehicle and to be alert to any problems that might arise. Because if you're in a Land Rover in the middle of a tribal trust land or 80 kilometers from the nearest farm or something, and you have a problem, you've got to know how to deal with it. Not necessarily be a mechanic, but to identify that problem. And so everything was geared towards us getting to our various stations and doing what we've been trained to do, i.e. policemen. Mm-hmm. So just before we left depot, we were asked our preferences, where we wanted to be posted. My one posting was Kariba because my first choice was Matabele land, but my second was Kariba because they had those powerful police boats there, and there was lots of tourists and lots of scenery other than crocodiles and hippo and elephants over the Christmas period and holiday period. And I asked for Matabele land district. I didn't know which stations there were there, and typical BSAP, what you ask for, you don't always get. And I ended up being posted at Hartley, a large farming community, mainly Afrikaans speaking, about 80, 90 k's south of Salisbury. Mm. And I thought, oh, well, there we go. I asked for a district station in the middle of nowhere, and here I am in Hartley. But it all worked out. It was a big station. The member in charge was Chief Inspector Jamie Walker. Jamie Watson, I think. I can't remember. And he was a disciplinarian of note. Jamie Whitelaw. And my very first case was an arson case on a farm about 30 kilometers out of town where one of the workers' huts had been burnt down. Transport to the scene was a motorbike, which was a Yamaha 350, which was not designed to travel on dirt roads. And I had my first experience of a pillion passenger who, his name was Constable Langton, was so nervous that going out to the scene, I had to stop and tell him, listen, you must sit still because we're going to have an accident. You must sit still, because he fidgeted and faffed around and whatever. Anyway, we get to the farm. We do the investigation. We stay overnight. They gave us a room in was just like a shed that had 2 beds in it. And we were so tired and whatever, we just fell asleep. and wound up my investigation. I had a suspect, but we couldn't take him. We'd have to go back to the police station and get a Land Rover to come pick him up. But in my opinion, as my first docket, my first investigation, I thought we didn't have enough on this guy, but he was a suspect. But anyway, Constable Langton and I went back to the station, completed my docket, and I carried on with my duties until about 2 days later. I was in the PO's office doing whatever admin work I was doing, and I heard this voice, "Patrol Officer Viljoen, come here now." And it was Chief Inspector Whitelaw, officer in charge, Hartley Station. And he had my docket in his hand. And he said, "This is atrocious. This is not an investigation." And he threw it at me. Papers all over the place. It was now getting time for the end of the day. If you weren't on first reserve, of course, about 3:30, 4 o'clock. He said, "You get Constable Langton, you get on the motorcycle, and you go back and you re-investigate this case and do not come back until it is complete." Whoa, well, now I've got a problem. I've got to get out to this farm with a pillion passenger who's as nervous as hell and get there before the sun goes down.
Jeez.
So, no pressure. So off we went. Pannier bags on the back, and I just reminded Constable Langton, "Please sit still." But I was traveling a bit fast because I didn't want to drive a dirt road, a farm road at night. And we were coming along a stretch of road that I knew had a very sharp hairpin bend with a huge boulder in the bend. So I started gearing down and slowing down. And as I was doing that, my constable moved. Well, that was it. The bike just slipped from underneath me, and we went down and heading towards this rock, which we hit, fortunately, with the tires, not with the handlebar side of the motorcycle. And except for a couple of grazes and whatever, we were okay. The motorbike started, and I just had to take my time. I thought I was a little bit shaken. And so was my constable, who when he fell off the motorcycle, I was trying to control it, and all I saw were this pair of size 11 boots come flying past me, and he screamed, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," as he fell off the motorcycle. And we got to the farm as the sun was going down, and of course the farmers there, they just loved having the police on the farm. And I told the farmer that why I was out there again. He said, "No, well," he said, "we'll make your beds up. You can sleep in the same room as you slept before," which we did. And I did the best I could from an investigation point of view. I spent a whole day and that night re-investigating, but eventually I left. I felt I could not investigate anymore. And the suspect was still employed on the farm. I told the farmer that he was a suspect, but they'd have to send out a vehicle to pick him up, or if the farmer was in town at any time in the next few days, if he could bring the suspect to the police station. Whichever came first. And he actually brought him to the police station the next day. And I got back, and my docket was accepted. The suspect eventually admitted to setting his friend's house alight because they'd had too much to drink at the beer drink that night, and got into a fight, and the suspect got a hold of a burning stick and set fire to his friend's house. Fortunately, they got out in time, so there were no deaths. So my docket was met with approval by the member in charge. And I had some good times in Hartley. We did, it was mostly all farm patrols. The town was fairly large. We had a big factory there, the Barter Shoe Manufacturing Company. And the main road was the main road between Salisbury and Bulawayo. And it ran right through the center of town. And although it had a speed limit, you're always going to get your jockeys that break the speed limit. So we did a lot of road speed checks, speed traps and whatever. But it was such an old-fashioned way. When I think back over the years how we did it, people won't believe how we didn't have any fancy equipment, or we just had radios. And we would put a constable, there were demarcations on the road. We'd put a constable with an A60 radio at the entrance to the trap. which was just as you approach town when the speed limit dropped to 60. And that constable's job was to tell us at the stop group exactly one measured kilometer away from the incoming constable. He would have to tell us when the vehicle was coming through. And it was, when I think of it, it was quite hilarious. You'd hear on the radio, it's there, it's coming in, it's coming in. He's talking about the vehicle now approaching. He's coming in, yes, he's coming, he's in, he's in, he's in. And we could see that this car was traveling fast, and okay, we pull him over, and we had a way of measuring. I've forgotten what we did, but we had a way of measuring. But this guy was blatantly over the speed limit, and fortunately, he admitted, he said, "Yes, I'm in a hurry to get to Salisbury." And anyway, but there it was, these roadblocks, and you know, they were effective. They did the job. You know, as old fashioned as it was great. And Hartley being a farming town, there were lots of parties. The club used to jump and jive on a Saturday night. Gatuma was 20 kilometers away, and if we were on a day off or a night off, we would hitchhike down to Gatuma and see the bright lights, as it were. But when I arrived at Hartley in September 72, I worked 1 week, 2 weeks, normal shifts, and then I was put on first reserve. Now, first reserve is you work 24 hours a day. You do your normal work in the morning, 7 till 5. Then you go back to the mess and you just stay in uniform and wait to be called out to anything, bar fight on a Friday night, a vehicle accident, whatever. And that was normally for 2 weeks. And yeah, I saw some horrible car accidents while I was at Hartley. At the age of 19, I saw what was my first partial decapitation of a passenger in a vehicle when a farm car, two brothers collided with a farm truck. And the brother didn't survive. He was partially decapitated, and not a pleasant sight. But, you know, and I think back, you know, for 19 years old, not being a hero in any way whatsoever, but to be exposed to that, and then to have to go through, you know, investigate the accident. And investigating an accident on a dirt road is nigh impossible. You know, you just look at the position of the vehicles on the road, position of the vehicles in relation to each other, any injuries, etc., which in this case was a death. And yeah, I learned very quickly. And the guys on the station were very supportive. You know, they knew I was the rookie, and they looked after me in times when we were off, and although we had a little bar at our police station at the single quarters mess, where every Friday night was darts night, and the farmers would come in and have a few beers, and we'd braai some meat and whatever. It was quite festive. Obviously, if you were on duty, you were not allowed to partake in any alcohol, which was understandable. You can't work and have a few beers. And I learned a lot at Hartley. I ran into a bit of trouble with a group of Afrikaans farmers, with my surname being Viljoen. My Afrikaans, although I passed Afrikaans at O-level, my Afrikaans wasn't very good because of my accent. And a bunch of farmers got together, and they came into the police station, and I saw them all arriving this one day, and I thought, what's going on here? I don't know about a meeting or anything. And they all walked in, and I was in the charge office, and they went to the memory charge's office, and they said that they didn't want me to patrol their farms anymore because I wasn't speaking their language. So after their meeting, the memory charge called me in together with the 2IC, and they told me, they said, you know, this is the problem, but you can speak Afrikaans. I said, yes. I said, I'll get by. I asked basic questions, but the farmers apparently were very pushy, and I was told not to patrol that particular area, and when my patrol came up, they would give it to another patrol officer. That only happened once, because shortly after that, I was transferred to Shabani, which was a mining town. It was the biggest asbestos mine, I think in southern Africa. And that was in February 1974. And I traveled from Hartley via Guello to Shibani, me, my dog, my rifle, and my black trunk with all my clothes in, all my worldly possessions in the guard's van. No luxury, it was a goods train, so it stopped at every siding along the way. And it took me almost the whole day to get to Shibani. And I was in uniform, got to the station, or got picked up at the station by the duty sergeant, taken to the station. And I said, I'd like to speak to the duty PO, please. And the constable behind the desk turned around and pointed at the board behind him, and there, duty patrol officer Viljoen. I was on first reserve call, where they kept me for 6 weeks. I had no time off for 6 weeks. I had to work straight through, and my biggest problem and most regular problem was dealing with bar fights at the Milton Hotel. And I eventually, or quite quickly, got to meet the two brothers. They were the Sinclair brothers, who were the instigators of these bar fights, which often spilled out onto the veranda. And we'd get a call that there was a bar fight, and we had one of our constables was a constable in Ndlela. He was a big Zulu. Now, I was told by the guys on the station that if ever I have a bar fight, get Constable Ndlela to go with you. Even if he's off duty, he'll go with you. You go with your constable. Take Constable Ndlela, because he was an impressive looking man. And I did that. Went and called him. My first bar fight was, my goodness, I arrived. And of course, here comes this young policeman with his two black constables, and everybody's falling all over the place. And the two Sinclair brothers, they fought like in the Wild West, back to back, throwing punches at anything that moved, including us. We weren't exempt from getting hit by them. But when we arrived, more often than not, the other patrons would come to our assistance. So Fridays and Saturday nights was always entertaining in the such. And when we heard there was a bar fight, it was 95% involved with the Sinclair brothers, who weren't small men either. But this Constable Ndlela used his bat and stick in such a way that he didn't cause any serious damage. In other words, no head or arm. He would use it on the fighting people's backs. And the one scene we went to, I arrested the one Sinclair brother, and he was wearing long trousers, very baggy, almost like a tracksuit. And we had a Peugeot station wagon, or not station wagon, a Peugeot truck with the closed-in back, and we got him into the back of the truck. And off to the station we went. We were charging him with disorderly drunken behavior and whatever. And as I opened the back, he came out at me with 2 bottles in his hands, which he promptly smashed onto the floor of the car and came directly at me with these broken bottles. How? And as I said, he wasn't a small man, but he came at me with such speed. Fortunately, my bodyguard, Constable Ndlela, was standing slightly behind me, so I didn't quite see him until this figure moved in front of me, and I just saw this my attacker being manhandled and thrown onto the floor and handcuffed so quickly. It all happened in a flash, but that policeman saved my night that night. I could have had a nasty incident.
Right.
And
what were they charged? What were they charged with, Craig? I mean, that's a serious offence, an assault on a police officer.
He didn't actually assault me, but it was an attempted assault with a weapon, with a deadly weapon, the broken bottles, which we brought in on top of his disorderly and drunkenness and whatever. But he was charged. I don't remember what he got and whatever, but so Shibani had its moments. I remember the one day now leaving town to go to the tribal trust lands. There was a bit of a hill which ran past the Milton Hotel, and on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday lunchtime, there was always people on the veranda which overlooked the main road. and I got a call of a sudden death out in one of the TTLs, tribal trust lands. And we had body boxes, which were the most awful things to use because they didn't have handles. You'd have to grip them by the over on the sides. They were terrible. Anyway, I myself and my constable, my duty constable, put the body box on top of the Land Rover on the roof, and I forgot to secure the roof, the lid of the body box. So I was putting foot. I was doing all of 42 kilometers up the hill past the hotel when the body box blew off the Land Rover roof. I believe the reaction of the people was one of horror. They were expecting a body to come rolling out because they knew. And there was this body box lying on the road, and people had gathered and were looking and saw that, okay, there wasn't a dead body in the box, but I moved pretty quickly to secure it onto the roof and get the hang out of there and go and pick up this dead body in the tribal trust land. Yeah, quite an eventful start to that sudden death.
That's what you call entertainment in a small little rural town, hey?
It certainly was that.
Better than a cinema.
Yes, of course. I mean, it was all live. I mean,
yeah,
it all happening before you.
Oh, wonderful.
So we had what was called force orders, which came out every 2 weeks from Police General Headquarters to every single police station in the country. And it was just general information, transfers, promotions, vacancies. And I'd heard a couple of people, a couple of police friends of mine talking about the support unit. And this one particular force order showed that they were looking for patrol officers. Now, I'd been a patrol officer for 2 years now, and I volunteered for support unit. And they were also particularly looking for regulars. They wanted regulars in the troops as much as possible, even just a patrol officer, preferably wanted to become a section officer. But anyway, I was at Shabani from February to September, February to September 1974. And I volunteered for support unit, and off I went to Tomlinson Barracks in Salisbury, where I was duly signed up with the BSAP support unit.
Wow.
And I was assigned to Tango Troop Commander, Section Officer Harry Wood. And they'd broken the unit up into, they divided the unit into 2 separate units. Unit 1 was the fully operational troops. And Unit 2, which I was in, was the protection troops. Their prime task was protecting the road and bridge builders and fence builders along the Mozambique border, and we were to provide guards for them while they were building and in the camp, etc., etc. So I tried very hard when I was told I was going to Tango Troop and knew that this was just a guarding job. I tried quite hard to get into Unit 1 to go and do operational work, but no, it's not like that. We tell you where to go.
Yeah.
So anyway, we off with Tango Troop with Harry Wood, my troop commander. I called him Harry Potential Hardcase Wood. He was a nervous. Every time we deployed from Salisbury, he was a nervous wreck. Craig, have you done this? Craig, have you got the ammunition? Craig, are the vehicles full? Craig, what about the leave forms? Have you got everybody? And if he didn't have me, he would crumble into a pile of nothing. But he was a good troop commander. Once we were out in the bush, he did his job, and he was a good troop commander. But just being deployed I had to be on my toes. I really did. And yeah, we did our patrols, or not patrols, did our guarding duties. As I said, not a very glamorous job. I developed a deep hatred for Mopani flies, because the face veils they gave us weren't suited to the job of keeping Mopani flies away from you. And Mopani flies went for any area of the body that was damp, i.e. wherever you sweated. And
for our foreign viewers, people who live outside of Africa, Mopani flies are tiny little bees, probably the size of 4 pinheads put together, the blunt end of the pin. and they would live in the crevices of trees and that type of thing, or perhaps in rocks and whatever. And they produce the most incredibly sweet, lovely honey. But they tended to live in dry areas, and so they looked for moisture all the time. And that would be up your nostril, in your eyes, in your ears, sweating. They would come in clouds, and if you killed one, they'd bring the entire army to the funeral. So
Yes.
yeah, that's what they were like. Just carry on there, Craig.
Okay, so yeah, they were, eventually it got to the point where, hang on, what am I doing here? Am I guarding these guys against a potential terrorist attack, or am I trying to save myself with these confounded Mopani flies, who, as you say, would arrive in these huge swarms? And yeah, they were, our face veils were just, and it was so hot in the Zambezi Valley. The face veils were more. So I just spent my day slapping my face to keep the Mopani flies out of my face, at least my eyes and my nostrils, as you said.
We used to collect dung of any type, game or cow, and light it and just squat over the smoke. It was the only way to get rid of them. They were nasty. What part of the valley was that in, Craig? Was that in the west, near Vic Falls, or further east?
It was east. It was in the area of Mukumbura.
Okay.
From Darwin on the mountain, on the Mukumbura Road, we traveled northeast, and Mukumbura was on the east, heading west border with Mozambique.
Yeah.
We had a satellite camp from Mukumbura, which was called Binya, Binya, and that was our where we had all the construction workers, all their vehicles, whatever, and our radio, our ops room and ops tent and whatever. And I was sent to Binya about twice, 3 times maybe, in a Mopani forest, very, very hot. The heat, even if you didn't move, the heat stifled you. And it didn't make me sleepy. It just made me just dull. And movement became a problem, because we weren't patrolling as such. We were just looking after a couple of Portuguese road builders building a bridge on a road, and they would stop working at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and we would have to be alert now, because they were all sitting under their shady trees until it got a bit cooler at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So we had to stay alert, but it was pretty difficult. The heat was oppressive. It really was.
Yeah.
But that was my first troops, my first into the operation area with Tango Troop. Right next to the Mukumbura, there was a police base camp there, which had the special branch rep, and PO Trevor Hatfield was the member in charge of the little police station. They had an underground pub, which was a rondavel that had been dug into an underground bar, which the Frelimo troops or the Frelimo commander would frequent on a Saturday afternoon, come over with his little Unimog with a couple of cases of warm Laurentina beer, and sit down in the coolness of our pub. And he couldn't speak English, but he got to know the language of alcohol, and eventually became quite a card. He was quite hilarious, actually. And by the time he went back, his people that he brought with him had to carry him to the seat and whatever. We'd leave all his big friends much backpacking and all that sort of stuff. And the South African police had a camp just across the way from us, and we had an airfield at Mukumbura. And every Friday night, the South African police were they'd had fresh rations brought in for them for their Friday night dinner, which was fish and chips.
Good Lord.
We didn't have such luxuries. We had our tins of baked beans and sausages, and they had a mess tent. We didn't. We had our individual tents which we shared with our troops. And they would parade, and they'd do before supper in the early evening. They would parade and have their prayers, and the smell of cooking fish and chips would waft across to our camp. And there was much talk of throwing a coup d'etat to raid the kitchen and to go and get some fish and chips. But that was just a thought. Then we had an incident. our camp was right up against the cordon sanitaire, the fence that the Israelis had built for us. And a report came through that there was a suspected CT in the minefield, and that engineers were being dispatched. They had an engineering camp there. Engineers are going to be dispatched to locate the body in the minefield, make sure the mines were cleared away, and we were to provide the escort, and which we did. So we were walking along the fence in not such thick bush, but it was thick enough. I was there was the army engineer in the front. There was the member in charge of BSAP Mukumbura post. As I said, Trevor Hatfield, 2 constables, and then a patrol officer, Mike King. He was one of our support unit guys. And we stopped, and the engineer told us to stop, and Mike King moved to the front. He was now walking number 3. And I was 4 behind him. And we were walking along, and all of a sudden there was this almighty bang. And it turned out that patrol officer Mike King had stood on an anti-personnel mine.
Mm.
And fortunately, he was wearing boots and not tackies. It blew half his foot away, but it blew him so hard that he ended up in the thick thorn bush. And of course, not all hell broke loose, but we immediately went into defense mode. But I mean, we were all shocked. It was a mine that had washed out from when it did rain, or just the movement of the sand. The mines would move down towards our camp and towards the southern part of the fence. And we had to be careful. And it was interesting to note that the army engineer missed that mine. He didn't see it. Anyway, we then had to have a casevac. And the operation was called off. And needless to say, nobody was recovered. We didn't continue with it. And if ever there was a body, he was just left in the middle of the minefield. There was no ways they were going to lose another security force member by injury going to look for a Charlie Tango.
Yeah, a friend of mine lost his bottom half of his leg in a minefield, and he became quite well known because he had this very heavy metal boot. And if you met any guys going into the minefield, he would stomp ahead with this big metal boot with his hands in his ears, as a joke. But he said those mines can, through rains and sandy soil or whatever, they can move a couple of feet a year and completely throw out their pattern of where they laid them.
That's right. What we'd had to do in the camp, our tents went right up to next to the fence, and the first 2 tents had to be cleared. Because although we had sandbags around those mines, it was uncanny that they would come down, as you say, they would move with the movement of the sand. And they'd obviously been there for a while, and we just have to make sure that none of them had found their way into the tents. The last thing you wanted was to go to bed after a long day and you sit on a landmine, on an anti-personnel mine. That would not have gone down well. So Mukumbura, ambush alley, a section of the road which was cement, a perfect sighting for a CT ambush because it was a very steep incline, and we only had the old Bedford RL, the Land Rovers, and the Hyena mine protected vehicles, but we'd have to stop the convoy at the bottom of ambush alley and let the mine protected Hyena go in front and clear the road, then let the Bedfords go up, because the Bedfords we used to carry supplies and troops. And it was surrounded on both sides by rock. It was an absolute perfect place for an ambush. And of all the times we traveled that road, and I was with Tango Troop, we never once were hit. And it was pretty daunting, there I was, 19, 20-year-old patrol officer now in the middle of a war. Unfortunately, the Army and SAP seem to be the favorite targets of the Charlie Tangos, and SAP especially, because they really didn't take their duty seriously. They thought it was one big holiday. So they took a bit of a knock. But Ambush Alley was not a nice place to be, definitely. But of course, you couldn't race up the hill because those Bedford RLs were notoriously slow anyway.
Hmm.
Um,
I'm curious.
and
I'm curious to know. Sorry to interrupt, Craig. You didn't really cover what your training with weapons had been up to this point. Had you done a coin course in your training, or was it purely weapons handling, or what was your experience up to that point?
we did a coin course in depot.
Okay.
Spent a week out in an area called Horseshoe Block.
Mm-hmm.
And joining support unit, yes, we had training. We a lot of board, not blackboard training, but sort of ambush positions, and went on patrol, which patrol formations to use, and an awful lot of shooting range training. Every day into the back of the RLs and out to Cleveland shooting range, rifle range, and just pump away thousands of rounds of ammunition. We all knew how to handle a firearm, the FN and pistols. So, and then I was taught how to use the Bren gun. But unfortunately, I was trained on the Bren gun, but for a couple of patrols, we weren't issued with a Bren gun. The guns were the Unit 1 troops. Although they had MAGs, Unit 1 troops took priority to be provided with the Bren guns. But anyway, I fired it, and a super weapon. It was a lovely machine gun, if you can call a machine gun lovely, but to work with. Yes, so there I was. And on the 23rd of March, 1975, was my 21st birthday. And on the 23rd of March, I was deployed on an unexpected ambush. And Special Branch had received information that there would be a crossing that night and that the ambush was to be laid. We had a look at the maps, and they gave us the position along the river. And my ambush position was a perfect ambush position, good line of sight up the river on a bend. And because we were the only available security force people at that time, they had to use us. So 22nd of March, my birthday is the 23rd, 21st of March, off we go, just me and my black constables and my black sergeant. And we get the log stats on where we had to go, and we walk, and our instructions were, we remain in that position 24 hours a day. If we need the toilet, we roll over, because there was a possibility of Sulu scouts moving into the area. That's how positive the information was. Once that happened, the area became frozen, which meant we could not move anywhere. Okay, fortunately, that didn't happen. Along comes the 24th of March, 22nd of March, sorry. 22nd of March, do our radio skids at 6 in the morning. And my troop commander, Harry Potential Hardcase Wood, tells me that we have to remain in that position until the 24th. So I said, okay. He said, P.O. Viljoen, I know it's your 21st birthday, but, bad luck. So what could I do? That it didn't happen that way. So on the radio skids on the 24th, sorry, I'm getting my dates. On the 22nd, I get an instruction to report to the pickup point along the road, and our section was being pulled out of the area, and we were going to go back to base camp in Mukumbura. I thought, that's nice. I'll be able to celebrate my 21st birthday. And that's what happened. We were duly uplifted. Ended up back at Mukumbura. Day 23 arrives. Craig Viljoen is now 21 years old. No birthday cake, but amongst the contractors were two bakers that had brought out bread making equipment, and they presented me with a round loaf of bread with 21 FN rounds pushed into the bread to serve as my candles. We didn't detonate them, of course, and that was my birthday cake. I was very thoughtful, and I thought, oh well, that's fine. And the pub had no beer. There's a song there. Pub had no beer, and or very little. But Harry would say, Craig, you know what? We got Cinzano. you just enjoy yourself. It's your 21st. So I did that, and I drank copious quantities of Cinzano and lemonade. Needless to say, I never touched Cinzano again after that. And my 21st came and went, and that was it. We were out in the bush for another week after that, and it meant nothing. It was the most important birthday of your life, and it didn't really worry me. I was with friends. I was with a great bunch of black troops. We'd had a couple of drinks together, and that was okay. And that's how I celebrated my 21st birthday, with Tango Troop at Mukumbura.
I celebrated my 21st standing in a trench being watered. So I think
okay.
You had a nice one there compared with me. But it was a happy time.
Oh, yes, they were, if you could call it that. But okay, yeah. Fortunately, I wasn't in that sort of situation. But anyway, so I then got back to Salisbury, and I was transferred to uniform troop, because after my 21st in 75, I was now a senior patrol officer, and we senior patrol officers were a much sought after rank, because they would immediately become 2RC of the troop. And I ended up in uniform troop as 2RC to Section Officer Dave Turton. He was the troop commander. Now, Dave had a reputation of being a party animal when he was on rest days on R&R in Salisbury. And I knew that because of the many times we would frequent the nightclubs and whatever. Dave Turton's sole goal that night was to get himself horribly drunk, and we would all end up carrying him home and whatever. And when a couple of my mates heard that I was going to uniform troop, they said, "Oh, you better watch yourself, because you know what Dave Turton's like." So I went with a bit of apprehension, thinking that I'd have to do the role of a 2RC and look after a drunken troop commander. Do you know, Tony, we didn't have a single beer in that camp. It was a dry camp. He never once, when we did a resupply, Dave Turton never said, "Bring me back a 6-pack or bring me back." He never touched a drop. In the 6 weeks we were out at a place called Matawa Tawa. I called it Mata Mata because it is in the middle of nowhere. And yes, and I was suitably impressed, and I actually respected him. I thought, what people say about you is not true. And he also turned out to be a damn fine troop commander. Yeah, so during all this, on my days off and whatever, and from 1971, I'd met a really lovely girl from Cape Town. And as the years went by, 75, I started thinking of migrating. My friends told me, "Nah, don't, man, stay with us." And anyway, this thought wouldn't leave me. I thought, "No, I'm out of here." Now, when I look back and I think, because I did resign. From uniform troop, I was transferred to Sierra troop. We were based at a place called Nyavaropa irrigation scheme on the eastern border with Mozambique, where we got shot at. And if it wasn't my patrol got shot at, we were patrolling along the Garezi River, which was the border between Rhodesia and Mozambique. And we were slightly exposed going up a bit of an incline, and I heard the shots, but I didn't move quick enough. But my constable behind me tripped me up and pushed me to the ground. And then I heard the bullets whizzing around us. And we crawled up this incline. We had nowhere to go, because we knew once we got over the incline, we would be safe. And, geez, what an experience. But, we didn't return fire. Our main objective was to get out of there. And, I think we did. Yeah, we did. Everything happened so quickly. So in May 1976, I resigned from the BSAP with these grand plans of moving down to South Africa and starting a new life with this girl. Well, all my friends, as hard as they tried, couldn't convince me. And I resigned, went back to Viljoen, out of work, and served my 3 months notice with the BSAP, as we had to do. And it was June. I stumbled across, I met a guy from the Rhodesia Railway Security Branch, Pete Murray, and at the Carlton Hotel in Bulawayo. And I was talking to him, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for sub-inspectors. Why don't you pop down to the main station tomorrow and see," I can't remember the guy's name, and have a chat. And I did that, and next thing I was a member of the Rhodesia Railway Security Branch, and as a sub-inspector. And because of my time in the unit, my 2 years in the unit in the bush, they sent me to the Booby River, which was between Beitbridge and Rutenga. Rutenga was a big army base about 50 k's up the road. And I was put in charge. I was on a permanent basis. And the rest of the security staff would come down, especially the white security staff. Myself and the black security members stayed there we were permanent there in the camp. And then the other guys would come down on tours of duty for a couple of weeks. But we had one major advantage to us. Right across the road was the Lion and Elephant Motel. And there was a huge lay-by outside our camp, and the north and southbound convoys would stop so the people could go and refresh themselves, maybe get a takeaway or something from the hotel. And of course, the hotel became our second home, and I was adopted by the owners, Ray and Beth Tor, and they treated me like a son. They didn't have a son, they only had two daughters. And I showed a lot of interest there, but I got the look from their father, Mr. Tor, Ray Tor, and he didn't have to say anything to me, but it was hands off, you know. And I was there for a while, until 76, and then 77 I was there, and then middle of 77 I was sent up to Vic Falls to relieve the officer in charge there while he went on long leave. And then I went back to Beitbridge. I asked to go back to Booby River, but they said, "No, we need you at Beitbridge." And I said, okay. So our duties along the railway line, it was between a siding called Sosonia and Lysanth sidings. Our camp was right in the middle of these two sidings. And we would have to put our patrols north and south, and with radios link up with patrols heading our way and report to Rutenga that all clear, and the Beitbridge guys would notify Beitbridge, and then the trains could roll because the line had been basically cleared. If we found a mine, engineers were dispatched immediately from Rutenga and Beitbridge.
And were those patrols on foot, or did you have a little Zoom buggy going along on the rails?
No, we had to do it on foot.
Good Lord.
Because the whole idea was to pick up the mine, and if we had those little buggies, it would be pretty difficult because they could move.
Yeah.
They could really move. And so, no, it was all done on foot. We'd start at first light, finish our patrol, which was normally early morning, 9, 10 o'clock, go back to camp, do a bit of training, clean camp, and just relax until nighttime. What I used to do is I'd jump in our Land Rover. I had a Land Rover as a company vehicle. I would, just before sunset, I'd just go and check, because the reservists, there was a camp of police reservists right next door to me, and they provided the guards for the bridges, and just to make sure that everything was all right, and that they saw that there was a representative from the Rhodesia Railways security branch just checking up on them, making sure everything was all right. I would take a ride out in the Land Rover, go and see that everything was okay, and yeah, it was a nice job. I enjoyed it.
But Craig, how far along that railway line could you patrol? I mean, it's a long railway line. How do you clear all of it with what is it, dozens of separate cars patrolling all the way along the line, different groups?
Yeah, they did have a trolley at Rutenga.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember, they had one at Beitbridge, but Beitbridge also did foot patrols. We did foot patrols because the length of line that we patrolled north and south wasn't very long. It was about 2 kilometers north and south, so it could be done very effectively on foot. And once the patrol was done, we would have to link up with the southbound patrol and the northbound patrol. And as I said, to make sure, okay, everything clear, your side, yes, my side. And then they would radio the respective stations to say line clear.
So
So
that was like 4 kilometers out of maybe 180. What happened to the rest of the line?
um, it was patrolled.
Wow.
Rutenga was a big station. It was our headquarters for the Rhodesia Railway Security Branch, and Beitbridge as well. Well, Beitbridge was a station. All the ammo trains and everything would come through Beitbridge. But that was at night, which was highly risky because anything could have happened from the time we did our patrols during the day to then. But as the war progressed, South Africa started pushing train loads of ammunition and equipment regularly.
Yeah, I believe one train that landed at Gwelo took 2 days to unload. It was just so full of ammunition.
Yes.
Did you sort of witness those train loads coming past?
Yes, it was. I was now at Beitbridge, where I was two-iced. I was second. Well, I was second to Mr. George Oddy, who was knocking on retirement age, and the trains that came through from South Africa, it was called Operation Barrage, and these trains would come through the engine. And in the middle of the train, and they were long 22 coaches. The middle was the South African Defence Force troops, and the last wagon, the guards van, was also South African troops. But they just wanted to get out of Rhodesia as quickly as possible. So the job was for us to unhook the engine, turn it around, pick up their 2 wagons, and they would scamper back to South Africa. And as I said, this was all done at night. My job, together with the wagon controller at Beitbridge, was to check each and every wagon's waybill that was on the side of each wagon. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, because the train was split. Half would go, when it got to Rutenga, half would go to Bulawayo and the other half would go to Salisbury. So it was my job as the first port of entry of this train to make sure that the manifest that I had matched up with the wagon number and the waybill on the train to make sure it went to the right destination. And that was a hang of a job. We would start, the train would come through normally at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was still working. And of course, we were a target. Although we had torches, we had these huge security lights lighting up the whole station. So it was a pretty high risk situation. But the job had to be done, and I worked very well with the wagon controllers, but very tedious work. And as I said, when the train got to Rutenga, that's where it split to Bulawayo and to Salisbury. Yeah, that was Operation Barrage.
Did you ever poke your head under any of the canvases? I think that's how we got our T-55 tanks in that way, under canvas.
Yes. They were so well tied down, but also being so well tied down, you could see the shape of the tank, you could see the barrel, and what little you could see, they were all on flatbeds. So, but an awful lot of closed in and secured ammo carrying wagons. And sometimes, as the war intensified and the political situation got where South Africa was telling Ian Smith, "Hey, listen, you got to sort something out." The trains were sometimes they sent through 2 trains a night. And that was it. I'd have done my work during the day, have something to eat, back to the station, wait for the first op barrage train to come through, the second one to come through midnight. By the time I was finished, sun was coming up, back to my single quarters, have a shower. I might be able to have a bit of a kip, and then back to work again. But it got pretty hectic. And but so I played my part in that little war, in the war effort. It would have been a big part if I messed up those labels. I'm telling you, there would have been all hell to pay. And,
did TERS attack those trains at all that you're aware of, Craig?
So say that again, Tony.
Were any of those trains attacked by TERS?
I recall one was attacked entering Rutenga, because we would get sit reps. I don't remember the outcome, but yes, while I was there, the one train that we inspected as it approached Rutenga, it got hit. but I don't remember any casualties or anything. But it was ambushed.
I'm
And
amazed.
those
I'm amazed that the tourists didn't target the railways more because, like when the Allies were advancing across France, all they did is smash the heck out of the German railway system, and because that's how you move your main goods, And there's a very large marshalling yard at Gwello.
Yes.
They could have blown up the switching boxes, or they never did any of that.
No, you're quite right. For some reason, known only to themselves, the railway line remained largely intact. Yes, there were attacks, there were landmines found. It could have got pretty nasty if they had got themselves organised. We could have had a serious problem.
Mm.
When you think of it, we were, yeah, of course we were armed. We all carried FNs and whatever, but we didn't have the luxury of hand grenades and that sort of stuff. And it was. The responsibility was huge,
Mm.
Because the Bulawayo line, Rutenga Salisbury line was a Beitbridge line was absolutely crucial to the country. But we did our job. We patrolled and we worked closely with the military. And yeah, it was daunting, but got the job done. Anyway, so when was it? About June 76? Yeah, June 76. No, June 77, September. Anyway, I resigned from the railways, so they sent me to Bulawayo, where I had to work my month's notice. And my job there was to travel in this huge, I think it was about a 10-ton engine that had been converted as a bulletproof, mine-proof vehicle, ridden on the railway line. It had a driver's cab in the front and a driver's cab at the back, because it couldn't turn around, and we would do the run from Bulawayo to Plumtree. And this train moved well, there wasn't a train, it was an engine. It was so heavy, it could only go one speed, which was like about 20 kilometers, if that. So it was excessively boring. It was just me and a handful of security branch members. But the whole idea of the thing is that because of the weight, it was made to detonate a mine, and of course it would become immobile, and that's where we would then have to protect. But that was also done at night. That engine would leave Bulawayo at, I think it was about 9 o'clock at night, head down to Plumtree. The driver would then switch from his southbound cabin up to his northbound cabin in the engine, and we would trundle back to Bulawayo, getting back as the sun came up. And I did that for a month. No incidents, although the Plumtree line was quite busy. There were numerous incidents along the line, but fortunately I wasn't involved in any of them, and I did my job. We called this engine Big Bertha, and that was it. Then
and of course
I left the railways.
The Plumtree line was essential, because if Beitbridge had been hammered in any way, the country would have had to get all of its goods through Botswana. So it was another vital route, really.
Absolutely. But yeah, and Botswana was harboring CTs there as well. There was infiltration coming from parts of Botswana. So yeah, that probably would have been used. But as you said earlier, amazing that they didn't really attack that Beitbridge railway line, which was, I mean, a railway line is so open, no matter how much patrolling you do and whatever you do, all it takes is one landmine and an ambush, and that's it. And so getting back to my love life, all this time that I was with the railways, this girl down in Cape Town decided to tell me, look, she can't wait any longer. She just sent me a Dear John letter, and it was very apt because my second name is John. So I got this letter, and she said, Dear Craig, don't bother coming to South Africa, love, Marge. Well, that was it. My world crumbled around me.
Yeah.
So I spoke to the railway security guy in charge of Rutenga and basically the line between Rutenga and Beitbridge. And I said, I'd like a day off, or I'd like the night off tonight, please. And I went and promptly drowned my sorrows in the pub at the Lion and Elephant Motel, and got out of it, and then decided, nah, this was the end of 77. I then decided I'm going back to where I believe I belong, and I rejoined the BSAP in February 1978 and went straight into uniform branch, operating out of Viljoen Central, and driving the Renault R4s as a patrol car, supplied to the country by France, and doing a car chase in a Renault R4 was quite a joke, actually, especially if the car you were chasing was slightly more powerful. And the Renault R4, the gear stick was in the dashboard.
That's
this
right.
long pole.
I called it a pop-up toaster with a gearbox in the dashboard.
Yes. And frequently, as I said, hurtling down Grey Street at breakneck speed, chasing the suspected stolen motor vehicle, and you want to chase through the gears, and the damn gear stick comes out in your hand, and you come to a grinding halt. And so I was in uniform branch for about 3 months, and we were called to a scene of a store break-in, 1 block up from the police station. The store was called Sanders, and we get to the scene, and the front window has been smashed, and there were other uniform branch, and there was the member in charge of the CPU section, crime prevention section, Inspector Randall Walker. And we were looking and seeing what was going on, seeing if we could see anything, waiting for the dogs. The next thing, these 2 black guys come rushing out, wrapped up in blankets and everything, came crashing through the second window and off down the pavement. And me in my leggings and my drill boots gave chase. And literally sparks flying as I chased this one suspect. And I chased him, but he outran me. I was on night shift, and on my next day, I was off. And the next day back on duty, it was morning shift. I get a message after parade, I got a message to go and see Chief Inspector Randall Walker of CPU. He wants to see you. So the only thing I thought of was, what did I do wrong at that store break-in scene? Did I not run fast enough? Anyway, he basically offered me a position in CPU. Now, everybody, all uniform branch wanted to be in CPU. That was the place to be. You were able to grow your hair. You could wear civilian clothes. You could work in nightclubs. You would attend any major events, be in plain clothes. It was a very, very good job, and we worked on our own. We worked from Viljoen Central Police Station, but we did our own patrolling. I slowly built up a network of informers, and it was brilliant. I worked with some wonderful policemen there, Phil McMahon, SO John Woodop, and many others that were good guys, and the woman, the girl, the lady police woman, and it was a well sought after position. And when you were told you were in CPU, okay, how can I get in? I want to join CPU, and I was very fortunate that I was instructed to join. That I didn't have to wait for a vacancy to come. So I worked with CPU, and it wasn't long after that, during 78, when the war started hotting up in the city centres, Salisbury and Bulawayo, that they formed the SWAT teams. And I was seconded to Victor section of the SWAT team in Bulawayo. There were 5 sections, and the official title was Bulawayo Urban Emergency Unit. And for the purpose of radio comms, that would have been too much of a mouthful. So they just made the radio call sign SWAT, and we were known as SWAT 1, SWAT 2, whatever the case may be. And we were then did a week in Stops Camp in Bulawayo, and a week about 4 or 5 weeks out, and we would attend scenes according to information received, and It was good. It was I saw quite a bit of action, but what made me very happy was that because of my experience in carrying the Bren gun and using the Bren gun in support unit, I was given the job as machine gunner in the section I worked in, Victor section. So I had my own Bren gun together with other paraphernalia. And we weren't like the like you see on TV, these American SWAT teams with fancy uniforms and bulletproof jackets and things. We had bulletproofs, but they were more danger in trying to keep you up than anything else. And or trying to pull you down, and you spend all our time trying to stand up with these things. But the camaraderie was unbelievable, and we had women patrol officers who were our medics, and we had some very fine section leaders, and we our section saw a bit of action. We had one daylight scene where a gang of tourists had come into the Black Township and were causing trouble and attacking beer halls, and there were casualties, and they had to call in, as a matter of urgency, a second SWAT team. Our team was on duty, but because of the seriousness of the situation, they called in other members. And anyway, we deployed into the township, and we could hear the gunfire. So we were actually following the gunfire, and we were moving house to house. And I had a reservist who worked with me and a black constable. The gunfire was getting closer and closer, because what had happened is other police units had pinned down the group in a beer hall, and all hell was breaking loose. We were standing up against the house. The windows were open, and I managed to get my head around the window, and I saw a foot sticking out from under the bed. And my reservist and constable were standing behind me, and I pointed to them. I moved away and I pointed to them that there was somebody inside. Next thing, the constable shot past us, went to the door, and that was it. AK-47s, he was killed. He was shot in the throat. The terrorist who turned out to be the section leader of the gang that had moved into the beer hall, he ran out, and I saw him. He ran straight across my line of fire. And I just let rip, and all hell broke loose, because it was just absolute chaos. And for not having used the Bren gun so often in support unit, that day I certainly put that gun to its full use. And we had our armorers had modified the magazine from the Bren gun is known for its curved magazine. Our armorers had converted it to a 32 round straight magazine. So I had plenty of firepower. I carried extra magazines, and my reservist partner carried magazines. So I was ready for a fight. But it's difficult to say who was responsible, but we managed to end the contact with having killed, I think it was about 4 of the insurgents, and but they had in turn wounded and killed quite a few civilians. It was an absolute mess. And it's you come out of a scene like that, a situation like that, and we all were quiet, and we all special branch moved in, the CID, to do their work, etc. And we quietly made it back to the trucks, and in silence, all with our own little thoughts, thinking, my goodness, we've come out of that, because it was a pretty hectic scene. In an urban situation, the chances of ricochet off the houses and or whatever, and lampposts and things, it was pretty high. And the bullets were flying all over the place. And and we went back to camp, and all very quiet and subdued, checked in our weapons, and just basically had a debrief with special branch, and just went and sat. And I remember we sat outside our billets, outside our barracks, and just then started talking about the day's events and what had happened, and the fact that Constable and Konanzi had been killed. The section leader, whether I killed him or not, I don't know. The section leader that had been hiding under the bed, he was killed. And we just sat there, just running the events of the day through our minds, and realizing, how close we were to something really serious happening. But like I said, the camaraderie was such that, there were pats on the back and well done, and job well done, and it was pretty hectic. And Bulawayo got very busy. And I was in CPU at the time of the battles between Joshua and Cornwall's Zipra and Robert Mugabe's Zanla troops at the black townships called Ntombani.
Yes.
The first battle was, they called it the Battle of Ntombani, was in November 1980. That again, Bulawayo city as a city just shut down. There was hardly no movement except for police vehicles. And then Ntombani 2 came along when, after Ntombani 1, they had some sort of ceasefire and they all had to hand in their weapons. But it was a joke because they would come in through the front door of this house that was selected where they'd leave their weapons and just walk through with their weapons. And we wanted to stop them, but our officer commander said, no, leave them. Don't confront. Just leave them. And that's what we did. And then Ntombani 2 blew up. The second battle of Bulawayo and of Ntombani. The effects of that. Now, I had a young family. I got married in 1978, and I had a little daughter, 1.5 years old. And we'd, I think it was Ntombani 2, February 81, when the patrol officer stationed at Essexvale radioed through to our ops room in Bulawayo and said he can hear the tanks starting up. And Cornwall's men had taken over St. Stephen's College just outside Bulawayo, and he had all his ammunition and all his arms and all his people there with him, and his Zipper members. And this patrol officer said he could hear the tanks starting, but they couldn't get the tanks rolling. Various reasons. One of them was that the track on one of the tanks managed to get to the main road and the tracks just fell off. And but a large convoy made its way to Bulawayo, but the army were waiting for them on the main Bulawayo Beitbridge Road near the Bulawayo Golf Club. Shot the fertilizer out of this convoy, and myself and my officer commanding at the time, we deployed ourselves, or we were deployed into the area, and seeing the direct hits on the APCs, the armored personnel carriers. Nearly all the hits in the convoy were direct hits. So, the occupants didn't have a chance of getting out. So they were literally fried in their seats. The driver at his seat, the rest of the men at the back, and some trying to get out the back, just fried. But 3 APCs had got through the ambush and were somewhere in Bulawayo. And that was it. We had to find these APCs. We, as CPU, were heavily armed. We were in my officer commanding and I were in a Renault R5, and the back seat was just full of weapons. Anything we could get from the armory, shotguns, Uzis, whatever. And we patrolled tirelessly, and I think one of the APCs got taken out at a roadblock, combined army and police roadblock in Bulawayo. And the other 2, I don't remember what happened to them, but I was so involved in trying to find them, we weren't able to do so. But my goodness, we drove around Bulawayo like, we normally did anyway during routine CPU patrols. So we knew the city pretty well, and we knew the roads that led to the black townships. And these guys, as far as we were concerned, they just melted into thin air. That was the last portion of my time with, I spent 1 year with the ZRP, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, in 1981. Like myself and my colleagues, we were career policemen. We didn't want to leave the BSAP, but we were prepared to give the ZRP a go, see what happens. Oh, what a shambles. You're looking at a situation where you've got a terrorist who was in the bush 6 months ago, and he becomes a policeman, and he's automatically given the rank of a section officer, which we had to write exams for, go before a board, and we could only do it after 3 years service. The discipline became non-existent. They were coming to work in uniform drunk. And as I said, I lasted a year with him. And fortunately, I was still with CPU. And the black policemen were terribly worried that, you know, that the police force would crumble, and that they wanted us to stay. But I had my young family to think of. And the Battle of Entebbe 2 ended, and Bulawayo returned to some form of normality. But then I made the decision that the only place for me is South Africa. I don't have any connection with the UK or anything, and that's what happened. I emigrated in May 1981 with my family and started a new life here in South Africa. But I've kept in contact with a lot of my colleagues, some of whom are still in Bulawayo. I'm a member of the BSAP Regimental Association of the Transvaal here in Johannesburg. And I attend as many get-togethers and functions as I can. So that was my time in the BSAP, Rhodesia Railway Security Branch, and 1 year with the Zimbabwe Republic Police. And it was so sad to see a fine police force crumble like it did. And it just became untenable for us to continue working after, like in my case, I include my service with the Railway Security Police because I was doing basically the same work as I was doing in support unit. I included it in my service. So all around, it was 10 years. It was a part of your life, or my life, that had a huge impact on me. I must admit, I didn't have it easy at first in South Africa. I wanted to join the South African Police, but various things happened, and a couple of colleagues of mine said, just think about it again, think twice. I became a reservist, but I was given mediocre jobs issuing traffic fines and that sort of thing. And when I asked if I could become a little more active, given my career, the officer in command in the police station at Florida said, no, you got to work 6 months before you can drive a vehicle and you can carry a firearm and become more involved. So I accepted that, but I didn't last long. I wasn't happy, and I went into civilian life, and there I stayed until all these years. And I've been here for many, many years. I have my memories. Unfortunately, I don't have any photographic stuff left. That all got lost when we moved down to Johannesburg from Bulawayo. Very sad, and even today I think about it because I had 3 photograph albums of all my stuff, and great memories, good times, wonderful people, close friends that we are still in contact with today, and that I'm still in contact with, I should say, and we share a common bond, a camaraderie that people who've never been in uniform and in a war situation don't understand. We're no better than anybody. We just did a job that was expected of us, and we did it with loyalty and zeal and dedication, and we served our country.
I think that was the key thing, Craig. It was the love of our country. We just loved it so much. We didn't want to see it perish. I think that was the glue that held us together. It was such a super place. Craig, I want to thank you very, very much indeed for a very good, lucid, clear talk, excellent memory. How you remember dates, I don't know, but you've done a fantastic job in the talk. And I love this type of talk. Yes, we can listen to all the special forces and the other guys, but we sometimes forget that the glue in the country was all sorts of other units. And so it's lovely to have heard your story, and I really want to thank you for coming on board.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tony. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And my prayer for you is that all goes well with your wife, who's not well, and
thank you.
That your future's a good and happy one. So that's my wish for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. God bless, my friend.
Tony.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.